vetoes elections, is going to be in a way a continuation of the earlier discussion that we had also with Jacek Kucharczyk. Dr. Jacek Kucharczyk is the president of the Institute of Public Affairs, which is a large think tank in Warsaw. And the conversation that we had with him before the elections, we are also going, most probably, to follow the other webinar, the online seminar, that the democracy seminar organized last week, I think last week. And it was we are all on the same boat, which included the lecture or talk by Jeffrey Goldfarb and a discussion with colleagues and friends in Warsaw. And we are all in the same boat was the discussion about the situation both in Poland and in the United States, both places which are not just flirting. Clearly, Poland is not just flirting with autocracy, but having this that the direction is also easy to sense in the United States. So today we want to let you know, if you are there already, that we are going to record that webinar, and that in other words, the event is being recorded. You will see it. You probably already seeing it on the shared screen, and you acknowledge that, meaning I am acknowledging that by participating in that webinar, in that event, your name, your phone number, and profile pictures might be visible to the public. The New School may use any recorded material from the event. We are very, very interested in our students having it available, and in our colleagues having it available at their time, when they have time to watch the event. The recording will be posted after the event. It will be posted on the website of the Transregional Center for Democratic Studies of the New School for Social Research. We are having 1 hour for that conversation. At some point, we will be inviting you to ask questions, and we will be trying to answer those questions. The questions will be visible to all participants. The questions will invite you to ask are on the chat, in the chat mode. You raise your hand and you write the questions over there. You can also ask anonymous questions and vote on questions you wanted to hear answered. And the Q&A, question and answer, will probably take place in 45 minutes from now or 40 minutes from now. We'd like you also to know that you can subscribe to the Democracy Seminar Network for information, news about events, but also about developments around the world having to do with the situation, uneasy situation that democracy is facing right now. And if you look at the screen, you will see that there is a link that we invite you to remember or to save for yourself. I think that's it. This is the housekeeping. I wanted to say that, yes,
one thing, that people can actually post their questions at any time, and they'll be woven into our discussion after the three of us start the discussion. So
very good. And also,
if I say something outrageous and someone wants to take issue with it, they can do it at the moment that I say the outrageous thing.
All right. This is how open we are here, and we are going to experience it in a moment. I wanted also to say that behind the scene, a very important person behind the scene is Lala Popper, Elzbieta Pop, our own Elzbieta Pop, who's making sure that everything goes well, and that we are actually able to smoothly conduct our conversation. Let me start with few thoughts. You may not know, well, you probably know, thinking about my name, but I am Polish, and I voted in those elections. I voted in those elections by mail from United States of America. I live in this country more than 30 years. I live in this country more than half of my life, and much more than half of my life, and I wanted to say that I take seriously, and I take and to say to take seriously, it's a misnomer. I am a person, and those of you who know me know, of hope. But there is a huge space between hope and hopelessness. And I think that there was this moment that some of us felt that way. But this is where I am, in that space between hope and hopelessness. And before we start talking about what had happened in Poland and how that affects, or how that actually could be coordinated or seen as related to the situation in the United States. One more caveat. I think we all know, we all realize by now well that that the world we thought we knew, is eroding. That the world we knew is expiring. That the economy, the politics, and culture, things have to be rethought. We in America, we are experiencing right now and taking part right now in one of the largest social movements in the last 50 years, certainly since I came here. There is a soaring unemployment. We are all facing, wherever we are, climate crisis. And I think that those thoughts, the reason I'm talking about, are not just pertinent to the United States of America, but also, of course, and not only for Poland, but to the situation wherever we are. So in this context, the elections that took place in Poland at the very end of June and of July, the second round of elections, and also the upcoming November elections here, require a new vision, require a new plan, this is a contingency we ought to think about. Pandemic was such a contingency, of course, and which forced the rescheduling of the elections in Poland. And that's why we had a new candidate running for the president, Rafał Trzaskowski, politically liberal actor, the president of Warsaw. And so let's just start talking about it. And we have questions. We have questions to ourselves. We have questions to Jacek, who knows best about the situation right now. But the first thing I would like him perhaps to tell us what had happened. Talk to us about the outcome of the elections.
Okay. Thank you, Elzbieta, and thank you, Jeff, for this invitation to continue our conversation on the situation in Poland as a case study in really democratic backsliding or democratic decline, as we framed it in our earlier conversation before the elections. What I said then is that I was rather pessimistic about the impact of the elections on Polish democracy. And it seemed that this pessimism was justified, because what happened, Elzbieta asked, is that the current government, the ruling party, and the current president, Mr. Duda, narrowly won the elections. It was very as narrow as you can imagine, 51 to 49%. With a record high electoral turnout. So the mobilization had to be very high on both sides of the political divide. Nevertheless,
what was the turnout?
The turnout was well above 70%. So that was the second highest turnout in the history of Polish democracy. The slightly highest turnout we had in 1990s when Lech Wałęsa was running against Aleksander Kwaśniewski. And at that time, Poland was polarized politically between what we call post-communist and post-solidarity parties and voters. Then Kwaśniewski won in a also very narrow way. This time we also have a case of extreme political polarization, but it is not about post-communism anymore. It is about between, let's say, Democrats, liberal Democrats, and populist authoritarians. I think it's one way to frame this political divide, and then of course we could discuss for a long time what these terms mean. So what happened was a narrow victory for the government, the ruling party that took over in Poland in 2015, and 5 years later they managed to win the third elections in a row, really, because the presidential elections came after parliamentary elections and European elections, which happened last year. And in all three cases, the ruling party has reconfirmed their priority or primacy or control of the political scene. So in a way, if we go back to this very simple question, which is assumed in the title of our webinar, which is democracy after the Polish elections, the outcome is really very bad for democracy, because although narrowly the populist authoritarians won, and they already took this narrow victory as a sign that they mandate to govern Poland in the way that they governed during the last 5 years, has been reconfirmed by popular vote. So that's I think the important conclusion. A narrow victory is still a victory. So I think
it was very costly for them, for the government and for the Law and Justice Party. They had to engage everything they had. They spent themselves out, and I think it was. I mean, so I just think that it is that I just worry, but at the same time I wanted to know whether people realize that this time their power might suffer.
Well, it doesn't look like this at this moment. I mean, one important difference between the situation in Poland and the situation in the US during the pandemic is that the economic situation in Poland, I mean, there is no overall feeling that the economic situation has rapidly deteriorated. And there is a feeling that this government, at least part of the society, feels that this government is steering through the pandemic and controlling the situation, including the economy. So in a way, that the impact of the layoffs, of the economic slowdown is probably still to come, but so far it hasn't been as direct and as visible as it was in the US. And I think this is one reason why this government managed to pull it off. Also using a lot of promises of additional spending after 5 years of spending on programs that they knew will buy them political support in crucial areas. So that's there is no obvious sense that after the elections this government will suffer some immediate backlash because people will feel that the promises were not fulfilled. So they in fact, I think, managed to buy some time for themselves. And obviously, since the next elections come in 3 years' time, they have quite a lot of time to complete this project of dismantling checks and balances within Polish democracy and transform it into sort of semi-authoritarian state where we will still have elections and the opposition will be able to contest the government, but it will be running an increasingly difficult task to vote them out of office. As was already
we'll go to that. Maybe we'll wait. We'll wait. So you answer partly the question, why did it happen?
Let me ask, Elzbieta, let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
Okay? So both of you seem really concerned. And I'd like to play the devil's advocate to kind of just make things very, very clear. Why are you so worried? So the party you didn't support lost. So the way the courts run are going to be a little different. Throw out the old, bring in the new, create greater efficiency. There seems to be, I read this morning, a move to repollinize Polish media. Media controlled by foreign interest maybe isn't such a good idea. Why are you so worried? Democracy is about making choice. People made a choice narrowly. You seem to think that this is a fundamental crisis in democracy. I think very, very clearly you should. Why are you so worried?
I worry. I did tell you I worry less than I worried. Did I say that already?
No, you said that privately.
Before the elections, yes, there is this huge space between the hope and hope. But I do worry because for very different reasons than Jacek began to answer. Why did it happen? One of the reasons that it happened is limited or shrinking public space. Now, it doesn't look like that, but in the country, if there is, in which 90%, maybe less, but I'm talking about the media are owned by the state. Public media are owned by the state, which are the only media which reach everybody in the country. This is worrisome, and I do worry because the lack of alternative sources of information created that, sociologists will call it a veil of ignorance. And you have half of the society who only have access to public media, voting just as media told them to vote. And half of the society who voted just as the church told them to vote. And the church-related media.
Do you agree with that, Jacek?
I mean, yes, I mean, there are several reasons that you could mention why the result of the elections was such as it was. So that this narrow victory for the populists. I would think that what's important even to remember about these elections is that it was you might call it a free elections, but not fair elections. And that already tells you about where we are going and the reasons to worry, because although Rafał Trzaskowski and the opposition could conduct the electoral campaign, the conditions, you might say that the opposition had already one hand tied behind their back. And that's for a number of reasons. And one or two Elzbieta already mentioned, the role of public media, which are incredibly well financed and which reach everywhere in Poland, and especially to the groups that, as it turned out, vote massively for the government, that is older people above 60 years old, people in smaller towns and in the rural areas. This is where there was a massive victory for this government. And this is also when there is de facto a monopoly of information from the public media, namely the government-controlled media. But also the conditions under which the elections were conducted were not completely free. you might argue that there were cases of what you would call vote suppression, especially for people who wanted to vote from abroad. There was a postal vote available, but many people who registered to vote actually did not receive their packages in time to send them back. And the big question is whether this was just a coincidence or incompetence on the side of the people who administered it, or was it intentional? Because as it happened, these conditions were most often found in countries where the local Polish citizens were likely to vote against the government, like the UK or Ireland, for example.
And there was a lot of people abroad, and Trzaskowski lost by 400,000 votes.
Yes, you might ask yourself what the outcome would be if these additional factors were not in play. Another factor is that the elections happened in the middle of holiday period, and there were some seemingly small changes in electoral law, which actually made it more difficult or complicated for people who, for example, traveled during the first round of voting and registered outside of their home. And then for the second time round, they had a problem voting at home. So that there were all these elements, which I think may be pointing to what will happen in future elections. I mean that.
And to answer Jeff's questions, simply there were irregularities in the elections, and right now they are formal protests registered, and in a few days we will know. Probably they are not going to be considered minimally, or they will say that's not enough. But I think it's important to know it's not just that people were locked, and that's my first reason to think why Trzaskowski lost. They were locked in the peace propaganda bubble, but also because that those who would perhaps had an impact on the elections were not allowed to participate in them in a full way. Just were not able to.
So I will also add that this is just a final word, that it is not obvious for me that if Trzaskowski received more votes than Duda and won as narrowly as Duda won, 49 to 51, for example, that he would still become a president. I mean, I think that it's quite likely that then the ruling party would use some other ways of delegitimizing the elections or even canceling them, as they cancelled unconstitutionally the first term, that is the elections which were going to happen in May. That there are serious doubts whether that decision was constitutional, and I think that even if there was a victory, a nominal victory for Trzaskowski, I think it's not obvious that the ruling party would accept this result. I mean, we will find out, because what happened is that they have votes on their hands, so they don't need to resort to all these other options. But I think that's another reason why I worry so much for Polish democracy, because even if the public mood changes and the support for the ruling party will start to erode, they have other ways of extending their stay in power.
Of course, we worry about that too. That's another kind of similarity and concern. I noticed that there are a number of people who are asking questions, which I think might help us proceed. I'm not sure if I should name names or not. Maybe just to be sure I won't. But these include friends. I'll add that. So one person asks, okay, what are the specific issues? What was the appeal of the ruling party to an obviously large segment of the population? And then our friend Michal Waszeczka says, notes that the idea that there are two Polands, Poland A and Poland B, are belied by the results. He thinks. He thinks that each party actually appealed to some segment of the population that would conventionally be considered in the camp of the other. So he thinks, he wonders if your proposition about polarization is actually accurate. So I think the two things together. What were the issues? And maybe the issues actually explain why the results, if Michal is right, the results weren't as quite polarized as the two of you suggest.
Can I just say something? It is from the distance, but I have to say that I could not actually stomach most of the things I read and heard. The very much less costly campaign promises. There was, of course, a financial, economic promises, which Jacek can tell us whether they could be ever realized or not. But there were less costly campaign financially promises, such as dealing with the gender ideology and especially LGBT ideology, and what Jeff you mentioned already, repolonization of the media. Now, those are very attractive, incredibly divisive. Yeah.
For me, you froze. So the issue of repolonization, but maybe only for me. So the less costly promises, campaign promises, which had to deal with the LGBT ideology, which is a child of gender ideology, and the repolonization of the media. Those are the issues, in my opinion, which feel that Law and Justice vicious campaign bubble and help to actually split Poland. It's not exactly that there are two halves, but it seemed as though it seems as though there are two halves. I do not think myself, that's why I'm hopeful, that we have a future ahead of us marked by the LGBT cleansings, deportations, or ghettos. I also think that I think Jacek may not be.
I will just add one sentence. I also believe that a considerable force, entire social formation was built, and peace didn't notice it immediately, even if they are not going to act upon it. But will the 10 million voters who voted for Trzaskowski, almost half of those who voted, 20 million people voted, right, make any difference for those who govern? I don't know. Those issues, I think, were important issues.
Right.
That's divided cultural issues that divided Poland.
We probably all read about the LGBT plus discussion, or really fear mongering by both Mr. Duda and the members of the government, the ruling party. And that was one important element of this campaign, but it's part of a bigger whole, because this campaign was really about fear and in a way trying to implicate the opposition in a number of policies that would ostensibly take away something from the voters. So the LGBT campaign was conducted under the slogan of protecting the families, protecting the traditional family. The issue of child adoption by same-sex couple was raised. So basically it was framed.
And sexualization of children in the future as a threat, meaning teaching little children of 4 years old how to masturbate themselves. This was the message. This is why it's so difficult to watch it.
That's exactly what happened. So that was one element, was basically framing the discussion as defending of traditional family and also defending of the children against this what they called LGBT ideology. So they claim that they don't discriminate non-heterosexual persons, but that they defend the rest of the society from some elements that they said were threatening. And I think that this was actually quite effective in for many voters, especially the areas where the Catholic Church has a strong control, because this anti-LGBT discourse is mirrored, of the ruling party is mirrored by the Catholic Church. And in a way, the reason why the support for Law and Justice Party is so high in these smaller towns in rural areas is not only because of what the access to state TV, almost the monopoly of state TV, but also because the impact of the Catholic Church and local bishops is very high. And people were hearing from their local priests the same messages that they heard from public TV and government politicians. So that the LGBT people are going to go after your children and so on. This was a very powerful and scary message for a number of people. But that was only, as I said, part of this fear mongering, because there was another element of this was that if the opposition wins, then all the social handouts that were introduced during the term of office of this government will be taken away. So child benefits, additional payments for pensioners. So again, something targeting these very groups, social groups that whose loyalty is crucial for maintaining the overall support for the government. So there were, in a way, Polish post office was distributing leaflets about what will happen if Rafał Trzaskowski wins. And this was sexualization of children, gay adoptions, but also disappearance of social protection for people, privatization of Polish industries. Last but not least, 2 days before the elections, Jarosław Kaczyński, the leader of our ruling party and de facto leader of Poland, came out publicly and said that Andrzej Duda will protect us from what he called Jewish restitution claims. And this is, again, maybe the less noticed statement, but I think something that may resonate very, very strongly in some areas, especially in this, again, smaller villages, Eastern Poland, these fear mongering and de facto hidden anti-Semitic messages that they imply could be quite effective. So in a way, the elections were not so much about policies or policy issues, even though the opposition tried to speak about policies, but it was about, basically saying that the government will protect you from all the threats that are out there, and only we can protect you, because the opposition is not serving in the interest of the Polish people. And that was the messages that they repeated really endlessly in very different variations. So the opposition didn't really have much space to talk about issues like our international security, something which is directly in the competence of our president, and or other issues like the forthcoming European and global recession because of the pandemics. because in a way they were constantly attacked by these accusations of what they would do and the threats that the government.
And Jacku, I think Americans could easily, not only Americans, could easily figure out that some of those things have been already used in our electoral campaign with when Obama was running for the president. We know it from the Obama campaign. Trzaskowski is not Polish. He doesn't have Polish soul. He doesn't have Polish heart. They didn't ask him for the certificate. Yes, and the Obama campaign posted.
So he
posted the certificate of live birth, because he's a servant of Germans. He's a servant of Jews. Whoever else. He is a traitor. The former prime minister said. The government used their officials to say those things. Those weren't things. Mm-hmm.
So as a longtime Polish watcher, this propaganda campaign reminds me of the Poland I knew in the 1970s. That there's an ideology. It's a very different ideology, but then there's an apparatus that kind of disseminates the ideology efficiently, and maybe even more effectively because. Sadly, a significant part of the population actually buys the ideology. I noticed that our friend and colleague from Brazil, Daniel Perez, posted some questions. First of all, he noted, even though what he noted last, is that the same issue about masturbation was used in Brazil. So as part of the Brazilian propaganda, which is, I have to say, mind-boggling, perplexing, but and I have a hard time wrapping my head around it. But I suppose I have to do that. He also asked a question about democracy and society. So I mean, I think. I view the closeness of the election as a great disappointment, but also with some hope, because I played a mind experiment, and I thought, well, what would happen in the United States if the primary source of news, and for some people, for a significant segment of the population, the only source of news was Fox News. And what would the election results be if that were the case? And I think Trump, I'm rather optimistic, even more optimistic than I was in 2016 that Trump is going to lose. But what would it be like if the media, if there was such a media monopoly, and that it became so close, I think is actually heartening. And that gets to I think an important part of Daniel's question about how is democracy in the society? What happens next? So there's this tragic defeat. Is there still room for maneuver, or is the game over? Looking at Poland and comparing it to Hungary, I think in Hungary the game is pretty much over. Maybe I'm wrong. I fear that the game is over in Poland, but the election results suggest to me that maybe the game isn't over. And
Jacek will say more about it, but I think it's not over. It's a part of my hope, the space between hope and hopeless expands. I actually think, and there was a reason that I said there was no alternative sources of information. Look, we already had that situation, and in the 70s, the whole independent media were created now, and the circulations of book and samizdat and so on, and that was important. I think also education has to be somewhat looked at, and I don't know what Jacek would say, but it seemed to me, from what I understand, that there is this incredible sense that something has to be done with this energy. People call themselves orphans after Trzaskowski, and Trzaskowski says, no, I'm not going anywhere. We are going to build a new movement. I am very skeptical about it because, although I'm not skeptical of building the movement, but I have a problem. And my problem is that I worry whether Trzaskowski actually has a vision for that moment in the history that we are right now, not just in Poland, but generally speaking, that I spoke at the beginning, that he has a vision, and this is not just reproducing or improving the old party that he represented, that old civic platform that he represented.
So just to be clear for people who don't pay close attention to things Polish, it's a center-right party, liberal in the European sense, and leftist critics might call it neoliberal. Yes?
No, it's not neoliberal party. Absolutely.
I didn't call it neoliberal. I said leftist critics could call it neoliberal.
Look at the large group.
Let Jacek.
Tell me about it. Okay, go ahead, Jacek. Yeah, I have one more thing to say afterwards. Yeah.
Two or three things. First of all, the game is not over, and there is a very, you can feel a sense that even though Trzaskowski lost and the opposition lost, they at the same time they feel in a way reactivated, and that there is this sense that we don't just go home after lost elections, but we carry on, and this is Trzaskowski's message, and he emerged from these elections as a kind of new generation leader who can actually go beyond the traditional party politics and create something broader than that. This is the aim that he himself speaks of. And I think that the fact that his electoral appeal was well beyond the appeal of his own party is quite important. So this is for me the optimistic part, is that both before the elections, during the campaign, and after, Trzaskowski used a very different language to that of the ruling party, and that was the language of inclusion, and also made appeals to the people who vote to Law and Justice Party, and used this rhetoric of new solidarity. So he said that opposition needs to take into consideration both the interest of those who vote for the opposition from the start, but also of those who are currently loyal to the government. And I think that this was quite refreshing to hear this rhetoric. He is, as Elzbieta explained, and that this is his party, the civic platform, is in European terms liberal conservative party, but Trzaskowski represents the sort of more liberal wing of the party. His deputy mayor in Warsaw is an LGBT person, and someone who is quite forthcoming with his views. So which is something that Trzaskowski actually paid some political price for, because it made him vulnerable to these peace accusations. But what I'm saying is that definitely I don't see that the game is over, and I actually have a lot of hopes related to this new energy. I worry how long they can maintain it in the unfavorable overall conditions that this government will try to create. Especially, I think that the steps that many people expect, we already mentioned, limiting media freedom, limiting civil society freedom, also attacking local governments, which are the basis of this new movement that Trzaskowski wants to launch. But this goes back to the Michał Waszeczka's question about polarization, that in one way, Michał is right that you shouldn't be too dogmatic about polarization, meaning that even in the regions where Law and Justice won decisively, there were very big minorities that voted for Trzaskowski. So even in this heartland of the peace country, as we call it, there were 30–40% of people who basically voted with all the community pressure to vote for peace. They voted for the liberal opposition. And of course, in big cities, there were people who voted for Duda, even though 70 or 80% voted for Trzaskowski. So in a way, you shouldn't be too, I mean, it's not really a clear separation as some people would like to have you. But at the same time, the divide seems pretty deep, and the people who voted for Trzaskowski, I think, are very decisively against this government and this way of ruling the country, and so they are in a way they will be very difficult to persuade that this government needs a second chance or something like this. So that's, I think that this opposition to Law and Justice Party is quite visible, and people have a feeling that almost half of the country is against the party that controls most of the institution in this country. So this is I think a very the opposition doesn't have a sense that they are a small minority in a country which is overwhelmingly supporting the ruling sort of authoritarian power. I mean, they have a sense of strength in numbers after this election result.
So I'd like to ask a question about outside forces. So a question from the audience refers to anti-European, anti-EU rhetorics of peace. Asks what for you to assess the role of that. And then I would just like to add to that, you know, Trump kind of weighed the scale in favor of Duda. You know, Duda visited Washington, Trump, just before the election, and Poles are famous or infamous for being congenitally pro-American. So this no doubt helped him
in America
in the final vote. But if I'm right that it's highly unlikely that Trump is going to be a president next year, then the question I have is, well, what's the relationship between this new, you know, how does the predictable tension that exists between Poland and Europe right now, manifested in a vote this morning, and then the likely tension between Poland and the United States with the Biden administration? Just thoughts about that. Both issues, Jacek especially. I know you have great interest in things European.
He knows everything about it.
Yeah. I don't know everything, but I think it's very important. But also transatlantic relations are important, even though for many Polish people there is a difference between being pro-American and being pro-Trump. I mean, it's not obvious that one thing is the same for the majority of people. I mean, that the support for Trump, according to some of the opinion polling that I've seen, is definitely below 50% in Poland. So he's not that popular, even though he is his support is important for mobilizing the sort of traditional populist vote, traditional Duda vote. And so probably this visit to the White House did help Duda, even though it's very hard to assess to what extent. I don't think it helped him a lot. I think this fear mongering was the most effective weapon that they had, rather than building the sort of positive image of Polish-American relations. with European Union and also with Germany, it's also a very interesting and quite complicated case, because all the research we know indicates that Polish people are some of the most enthusiastic pro-Europeans within all the member states. And interestingly enough, this support for EU membership has not diminished despite the regular attack against Brussels from the ruling party. So it is a bit schizophrenic when half of the population, or at least, supports the party which is using Eurosceptic rhetoric, but at the same time defines itself as pro-European. But part of the explanation, I mean, it also explains why Law and Justice is during election periods, because it was not only during this elections, but also earlier elections, avoids directly attacking the EU. It attacks mainly the opposition as being too blindly, following international elites, EU elites, but the attacks are against the opposition. And it's very similar with this anti-German rhetoric. It's not really directed against Germans as such, or Germany or Angela Merkel. It's more saying that the opposition, like people like Trzaskowski, are representing German interests. So in a way, they made them look bad because this is foreign interests, but it's they avoid direct attacks against Germany as well, because this would the reason that the sort of anti-German sentiment in the Polish society is not as strong as it was even in 1970s. So even though this rhetoric is there, it's mainly directed against the opposition, which they claim is not looking after Polish interests, but after some other interests. So
Germans will come and buy our forests from us. We won't have forestry anymore. That's very important. That's what comes to me.
But I think that in the longer run, what happens both in the EU and also with the possible change of the administration in the US is important, because when this government was criticized by many EU politicians, they always could say that at least we have a strong supporter in the White House, and it was important for maintaining their international credentials. If this is to be changed, and if there is a Biden administration which will be much more forthcoming about the rule of law issues in Poland, I think it will be very difficult to maintain this story of success in transatlantic relations and maintain the claim that the government is in control of foreign policy. With the EU, I think what this government is really afraid of is not really the criticism, but concrete policy measures. And we just had a summit of European Council, that is meeting of heads of states and governments of the EU member states, which discussed this rescue package for European economy. And this government knows very well that the ability to maintain the economic prosperity that people have got accustomed to over the last year largely depends on keeping the EU funds coming. So they are seriously worried about these ideas that the distribution of funds should be connected with observing the rule of law and other EU values.
Yes, could you please correct me if I'm wrong? Because I think it's important to say it, that quite recently also, there was a new direction or directive coming from European Union that the funds which are to be distributed to various parts, regions and of Poland, are not going to go through government as they used to, but they will circumvent the government and go directly to local self-government, which is actually another yet incredible, I think, important kind of hope for the maintenance of Polish democracy. Am I wrong?
Well, this is an idea that was proposed by a number of politicians, but unfortunately, the conclusions of this last summit don't go that far. I mean, there is good news and bad news in it. That is, the good news is that the statement about connection with the rule of law and the distribution of funds is there. But the language of the conclusions is quite vague. So basically, the key issue here is whether payments will be suspended by by majority of votes in the council, or by or is unanimity needed to do this. And obviously unanimity means that even if Poland is not allowed to vote in this case, if there comes to vote, some friends like Hungarians may step in and block decision. And the conclusions are ambiguous. That is, it's probably the leaders of the EU leave it open for political decision. So it will, I think the pressure needs to be continued on the EU to actually put its money where its mouth is. And if the government really goes ahead with further destruction of checks and balances, there will be practical decisions, because this would be extremely difficult for this government to explain to their voters why, in the case of worsening economic situation, which will obviously come, why their policies close this important venue of I mean the source of economic support. So I think the specific decisions are still ahead, and I think political pressure needs to be continued.
Here it is. Pressuring.
Okay. So listening to us talk, mostly to the two of you talk, I think I can draw a conclusion. Our time is more or less up. So I'm going to propose this as the conclusion, but then invite you to comment on it. I think that there's bad news and good news from Poland. The bad news is that the democratic forces were defeated, and the authoritarian forces were victorious, and they have means to solidify their victory, given the apparatus that exists, governmental apparatus that exists in Poland. The good news is that Polish society, the Polish social forces that oppose this bad news are alive and well and flourishing, and to some extent energized. A question of how long that energy can be sustained, but it's energized. And so the case is not for Polish democracy is not yet closed. And then in addition to that, outside forces, outside democratic forces may be playing a role in the relatively near future, in the form of Europe, but also perhaps in the form of a different foreign policy coming from the United States. These days, the United States is supporting authoritarians around the world. We can hope that that's not fated to last very long. So I've lived for many years being concerned with these two countries, and I see that their fates connected these days in ways that would have surprised me at any other time in the past. And And I think we our discussion described the texture of the state of democracy and both its promise and tenuousness in Poland today. So thanks, colleagues, for helping me and the audience understand. Thanks, audience, for taking part and for your very good questions. Jacek and Elzbieta, if you'd like to add last words, now is the time.
Can I think it was a very, very beautiful conclusions, I think, of our conversation. I agree with everything you said. I would only add that, and I've seen a question here about what international civil society can do for Poland. And I think it is extremely important to not just to put political pressure on the government, but to work with Polish civil society in alleviating the fear levels and changing the attitudes of this broader society, especially towards sexual minorities, towards gender roles. I think this work needs to be done on grassroots level, because before we can expect politicians to really step out and speak bravely on this. And this is really the task, as I see, for civil society, for international intellectuals to work on changing the values on societal level before they can be challenged on the political level. That's I think a very important task ahead of all those who are not politicians, not directly involved in politics, but are active in academia, in civil society, in the media. This is what we need to do in Poland to ensure that this politics of fear is not anymore politically effective as it was during this last campaign.
Since I'm an upbeat person, I will be a little bit less optimistic at this moment. I wanted to say that few days ago I was watching a visit Rafał Trzaskowski did to Gdynia. I noticed that one of the questions is, why was he even nominated to run for presidency? Well, the prior one, a new person, one can say, in the political scene. He's not so new. He worked at the European Parliament. He's the president of Warsaw, but above all, he had this incredible, almost immediate appeal, and I think that was the reason why he was selected once the prior candidate resigned because of the pandemic. Let me just say that I watched this meeting with him in Gdynia after the elections. He went to say thank you to the citizens of Gdynia, because this is where he got the biggest number of votes, some extraordinary number of votes. And while waiting for him, a singer with a guitar through the loudspeaker was singing a song which kind of made me both sad and happy. And then I thought that I should not be neither. It said, jeszcze będzie przepięknie, jeszcze będzie normalnie. That's a refrain. It still will be lovely. We will still have a normal, it still will be normal. I worry about it because I hear a nostalgia here for the past, for the last 10, the past of the last 10 years, prior 10 years. And I worry because I think the world is going to be different. And if Trzaskowski is going to run this new solidarity, this incredible, he has ambitions, and I think he's perfect social movement. He has to remember, this is not a return to normalcy. This is building a new situation and democracy for our times that are going to be much more difficult and demanding, I think. So not to forget what had happened, but not to be too happy with the immediate result. Just push ahead, onward.
Okay, thank you both. Thank you to the audience for putting up with us and for presenting interesting questions. Just one little note on Jacek's point about civil society. Of course, an important part of civil society, if not the most important part of civil society, certainly not. Pressure from the outside and engagement from the outside is the New School's Trans-Regional Center for Democratic Studies and our seminar, the Democracy Seminar, in which we hope to be continuing such discussions into the future. Whether the political prospects move towards the better or to the worst. So thanks, everyone. I guess that's a wrap.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
I hope there's a way that we can talk for a few minutes after the thing goes off. Yeah.
Doing hot.
Yeah. That you know, if
somebody wants to join us, they should join us. If
people are listening, it's fine. I mean, one of the things I find very frustrating about this meeting this way is that you don't say that's the end, and then the speakers talk to each other, and people from the audience come up, and you have informal conversation. I miss that. So every time when we finish, I feel, and then you go out for a drink, depending on, or for a coffee. That part of it is it's really a shame that we don't have a Zoom equivalent to that or a webinar equivalent for that.
Pipeline with white wine.